Uh, Good morning again to everyone. Welcome to the Student Symposium, the Science Week. Good morning, sir. We have with us our distinguished alumni, Dr. Khalda Shetty, an alumni at UAS Bangalore from 1979 to 1983. Today, we have the theme as excitement in science, and Dr. Khalda Shetty would be speaking on systems innovations to address global challenges. Dr. Shetty is fondly called as Kali at UAS Bangalore. He is a microbiologist by science and food biotechnologist by practice. He is currently the Associate Vice President for International Partnership and Collaborations, the founding Director of Global Institute of Food Security and International Agriculture, and also the Professor of Plant Science at North Dakota State University, Dakota, USA. I would request Dr. N. Srinivasa, the Dean Postgraduate Studies, to welcome and address about UASB Science Week 2021. Dr. Srinivasa, the Dean Postgraduate Studies. Sir.
Very good morning. A hearty welcome to all the participants and special welcome to Dr. Khalda Shetty, an alumnus of UAS Bangalore. Before getting into the formal welcome, I want to make a mention about our Science Week program at UAS Bangalore. Really, what I want to make a mention here is that our agriculture graduates, the graduates from University of Agricultural Sciences, Bangalore, they are really blessed. They enter into the world of science at the undergraduate level only. They study science, the agriculture science, and also at this point of time, I should also make a mention that it is also well known that agriculture is the mother of all culture. In the same way, I think I should also put forth agriculture science is the mother of all agriculture. Agriculture science is the mother of all sciences. We can see element of science in all agriculture subjects. This is what actually happens at UAS Bangalore. The graduating students at the undergraduate level, they study the science. They study the agriculture science. When they come to the next level, at the postgraduate, they actually what they do is they understand the science at the postgraduate level. And when they get into the doctoral level, they actually practice science. This is way actually all our agriculture, all students who enter into the agriculture university, they are blessed and they are introduced to this, all the three phases of science that is through the channel of agriculture. And coming to the actual Science Week program, this is a festival of science. I can make a mention here that all the outgoing postgraduate students, particularly the doctoral students who are in the completion of their doctoral programs. It is only a 3 years program, but depending upon the science or the research, it can extend beyond 3 years. That to celebrate it as a science or the practicing aspect of science, actually they will be presenting the part of the research work during this Festival of Science. It is an annual event. And this is the 8th edition of the PG Student Symposium Science Weeks are being celebrated at UAS Bangalore. It started in the year 2014. And here, the main intention or the objective of this Science Week, organizing or holding the Science Week is that we have to just inculcate or put our students in the world of excitement. That means they are actually exposed to the science in the curiosity level at the undergraduate and also at the PG level. When they come to the PhD, and actually they experience it. And they will be presenting their part of the research work during the scientific celebrations. And as you all know, it has got a wide, that agriculture science is a diverse field. It is encompassing all the disciplines. About 16 disciplines, we have the doctoral programs. For our convenience, we have divided into the 4 major themes. We see the science, the research in the crop improvement is encompassing the major divisions of genetics and plant breeding, crop physiology, microbiology, horticulture. And when you come to the production, crop production, we have the other major disciplines like agronomy, microbiology is also there, soil science and agriculture chemistry. And by protecting the crop protection theme, we have the plant ecology, agricultural entomology, and also the sericulture. And lastly, the social sciences, they are actually what we can say, they channelize the technology or the scientific improvement or the development to the stakeholders, the farmers. That is where we have the agriculture economics, agriculture extension, and added to that, we have the food science and nutrition. I think I should make a mention here that this is the more relevant field to the information of Dr. Khalda Shetty. Actually, he is more concerned about the food security, and also his specific area of interest is climate resilient, health related food security. That's actually really, I appreciate that you have found an element of science in all aspects, or it has been diverted into this thing. And also and during this scientific program, under 4 themes, our doctoral students will be about, this time there are 104 PhD students. They are presenting their part of the research, and it will be evaluated by the external experts, and they will also suggest if they are in any point modifications or in analysis or in the discussion part, and also that will improve their communication skill also. I think with all this identity, this one objective and the significance, we have framed this science. Here, I want to just make a mention here that all our agriculture, because this is the time, yesterday we started the scientific program on 27, and yesterday it was a coincidence that among all the state agriculture universities in the country, our university actually was rated as the university securing the maximum number of PG scholarships. And we have secured, our PG students, they have secured 38 scholarships at the agriculture science, and also in the engineering section, actually we have secured 10 fellowships. That shows that how our students are into the excitement in the science and they are enjoying it. This is what I want to make a mention, that I should congratulate all of our students and also the faculty responsible for making this or preparing our students to achieve this, for securing the scholarships to continue their research at the postgraduate level, and also followed by the doctoral work. This is what actually I want to make a mention, that this is for the information of all the faculty and also our officers and also the scientists, and also specifically to Dr. Khalda Shetty, that you should also feel proud that our students are in the line of your area of research. That's what I want to make a proud mention of about this. And one thing, before getting to the actual formal welcome to Dr. Khalda Shetty, really, I was going through your mail, and this one saw the quotation by Thomas Alva Edison. What he says that you have mentioned it, that the doctor of the future will give no medicine, but he will take interest in the care of human beings and also the diet and the cause and prevention of the disease. I think that we should carry this message to the agriculture field. It is more relevant because we are not interested. We should actually take care of the plants and also the nutrition of the plants. and then so that we can avoid any pests and diseases occurring on our croplands. And also it is followed by another saying by Dr. Albert Einstein. He says that he embraces all living creatures, the whole nature for its beauty should be appreciated. This is what actually we have to live in a harmony with all the creatures and particularly the plant species. And also really I appreciate, and also I was by going through your research credentials, and you have got a high temperament or excitement in science, and you have a HI index of 70 and above, 75 on Google Scholar and 60 on Scopus. Really, research actually make a mention of this. That means we also feel proud that a alumnus of UAS Bangalore has achieved this. And today, definitely your presentation will inspire, motivate our students that. And I also appreciate that your area of specific area of interest, cellular and metabolic basis of oxygen biology of food plants. I think no doubt we know that you are a professor of plant sciences, and then you are also concentrating your work on the climate resilient health oriented food security solutions. This is what actually. And also you have mentioned in about your area of studies, the food safety and also security. And you have traveled worldwide and you have a lot of experience, and you have given good lectures in the different continents in Asia, Europe, Africa and Americas. And I just want to make a mention of about a specific area of interest, and I could get some catchy words from your biodata. I can say that you have mentioned about indigenous wisdom. This is what actually we should also understand. Always we talk about the ITK, indigenous technology and the knowledge, and then how it will be used intelligently. That actually we have to appreciate the indigenous wisdom. And also you have mentioned about the traditional fermentations. This is what actually we have to, everybody should know that the common, very simple traditional medicine for all our ailments is our buttermilk. That is a product of indigenous fermentations. That's why, for example, any change in your food habits, I think the food style definitely immediately we will say that you go for a buttermilk or a curd rice. That will be a final solution for all your, the digestion processes or anything. And also your interest on the plant microbial interactions. That is actually should be a basis for sustainable agriculture. I think yesterday, the last 2 days, we have presentations, and most of our studies are concentrating on the endogenous fungi, endophytes. That is very important. Actually, we are going in that line. It's also a new line of work. And also, I think with this brief introduction and also the more relevance, and I feel very homely, and also with I don't say it is a formal lecture or anything like that. It is an informal chat, and also he will be sharing his experience. And I wish him a warm welcome from the Directorate of Postgraduate Studies, from all the graduates from UAS Bangalore, and also the deans, and also the research faculty and extension faculty. I extend a warm welcome to you, sir. This is your time now. I think you have to, you should add to the excitement of science, excitement in science to our agriculture graduates. I think with this formal welcome, I actually as a request Dr. Mohan Rao to take over and to invite him formally for the lecture, the plenary lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. That was our Dean Postgraduate Studies who has actually introduced Dr. Khalda Shetty. Despite his warm welcome and introduction of Khalda Shetty, I would like to make a formal introduction as well. I'll be a bit brief. Dr. Khalda Shetty was an excellent cricketer. I think all of you must be aware of this. Sports and education go together. He was an excellent opener, the finest of the cricketer, represented US Bangalore as an opening batsman. If I'm not wrong, sir. And this runs in the family as well. Is one of his brother is a state cricketer as well. Hails from Bangalore, born to a practicing doctor. Had his formal schooling at St. Aloysius, Bangalore. He did his base agriculture at US Bangalore. And let me tell you, he was the recipient of the gold medal. 4 out of 4, none of us can dream of. He majored in microbiology and crop physiology at US Bangalore. Mentors probably were P.V. Rai and Dr. Shetty at that point of time. He had his master's at bacteriology, University of Idaho, Moscow, and doctorate at, again, University of Idaho, Moscow in microbiology. He has 2 postdoctorates to his credit, one at Canada, University of Guelph, and at the National Institute of Agrobiological Sciences, Japan. He has served as the assistant professor, associate professor, and the professor of food science at University of Massachusetts, USA. Currently, he is the professor of plant science, founding director of Global Institute of Food Security and International Agriculture, and the associate vice president, International Partnerships and Collaborations, North Dakota State University, USA. Dr. Shetty has 6 patents to his credit, 225 peer-reviewed journal articles, 75 book chapters, and to the excitement of all young students, his H index of 75 on Google Scholar and 60 on Scopus is no match to any scientist that we can dream of. Congratulations, sir. You make all of us proud, and you are the torchbearer of US Bangalore and an excellent example for young students who are attending this conference. Every young scientist would dream of an award. And let me tell you, he is the recipient of the Jefferson Science Fellowship, the highest award that any scientist can expect in the US. In the year 2004, he was selected by the US State Department and bestowed with the Jefferson Science Fellow. Dr. Shetty has widely traveled and has been invited to present lectures and seminars in the areas of food biology, climate resilient, healthy food systems for food security and health, and food safety in over 50 countries in Asia, Europe, Africa, and America. He has deep commitment to global education and capacity building. His current passion is to advance research, education capacity building, and policy on sustainable and ecological basis for climate resilient, healthy food systems and food diversity to drive global food security. He has a lot of concern on the poor masses, specifically in terms of healthy diet. He is concerned about the Indian government popular schemes of making available rice at a subsidized price, which has been the sole reason for a poor and unhealthy diet among the Indian masses. Sir, we are keen to listen to you. All the students are keen to listen to you. I'm sure you'd excite all our young professional students Over to you, sir. The stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. You can hear me, right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind invitation. Just a correction. I didn't get 4.0. I got 1B.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
And that's a joke. Thank you for your kind invitation, and really honored and grateful to speak to our own student, my alma mater, UASB, which in those days we had a trimester system. In a way, it was more rigorous because we had 14 weeks in a trimester. But it was one of the best teaching. I mean, we had 192 credits, and the depth of those credits, I think I can still hear. Even agronomy, extension, all those courses were were all valuable in their own right. And I think some of the best courses were in economics, and of course, microbiology was good, but physiology, yeah, the breadth and depth of the agriculture university courses were very good, a good foundation for many things. So what I like to present today is the title I was given is Excitement in Science. So I'll just give you a sort of a perspective of what excites me, but in a way through that, I can tell you how a conceptual foundation and a sort of a getting out of your field and trying to sort of integrate ideas through a system logic, you can get a stimulation. And most important is anything that you do must be relevant to a larger societal challenges, whether you're dealing with fundamental science or whether you're looking at applied. And in agriculture, you need both. And even when you're doing applied science like agriculture, your foundations and basic fundamentals should be very rigorous. So that's very important too. Sort of fundamental logic should always flow. So that's the kind of point that I'm going to make, because as you integrate these ideas and think of global challenges, then you have more excitement. So every day is very purposeful. Every day has a goal, and so you won't be bored in what you do. So in the end, what you do should not be work. It should be sort of enjoyable. I wouldn't say task, but something that you enjoy a lot to. And in the end, what's a purpose? A purpose is to be beneficial, to be useful to larger society and to humanity as a whole. So with that, what I'd like to do is I'm going to take you through how science is changing, how the global innovation is changing, and through that, how agriculture is going to be one of the central tenets of how life science is going to advance. And more so in this post-pandemic world, as we have seen this ravages of the pandemic, it still isn't as bad as the 1918 flu so far. We are more resilient, but still it has created tectonic shifts. And most important is there's going to agriculture, the foundations of agriculture is going to be even more important as we think about how are some of the global challenges going to be addressed. So I'm going to take you through that. Sometimes I'm going to just share my slide and then continue my discussion. Let me see, where are we? Okay, here we go. Okay, you can see my screen, right?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me? And
Yes,
you can see my.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
sir.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Should I increase the screen size?
No, you can go to slideshow. I think it will be.
Okay, I'll go to slide slow. First, let me go to the first slide. Okay. So here is the first slide. I'll go to this. Okay,
It's
you can
perfect.
still hear me, right?
It's perfect, sir.
Okay.
It's perfect.
Okay, great. So the title that you gave me is Excitement in Science, but I'm going to sort of discuss how systems understanding is important and how this is relevant. So unless you sort of think about global challenges and look at how what you do, whatever you do, has relevance to it, then you don't have that excitement. So excitement comes as you can see human and wider challenges. So with that in mind, if you see the technological shifts in the 19th century, you had the atomic revolution in the earlier part, and by the 50s, Watson and Crick, you had the biomolecular revolution, and by the end of, as we were getting out of UAS, suddenly, within 10 years of that, we started having computers. And so the information age emerged. But now, as we are in the 21st century, we are in the area of systems integration. And more so, you see the 4 domains here. It's not just the information revolution, which is in the mechanical domain, which is actually one domain. So if you really see our planet, we are in the potential midst of a 6th anthropogenic potential extinction, meaning human activity is likely, potentially could destroy who we are. And so therefore, if we humanity have to move forward, there are 4 areas of the global innovation economy in which we are at the moment. One is the realm of environment. Unless we have a sustainable, diverse environment and we maintain it and maintain the biological species, we will go extinct. And already over the century, 1/3 species have been lost. So if our agriculture foundation has to be strong, the balance between the environment and biological systems has to be very harmonious and sustainable. And of course, this requires the human mind to be more compassionate. So unless humanity, this anthropogenic, this species that's destroying the environment and the biology in it, unless we become more compassionate, more empathetic, then whatever machines we develop to sort of manage the environment and biological system becomes futile. And this pandemic has already shown a biological intervention can easily break down the environment, however advanced our machine world is. And therefore, we are going to see as the pressures on the environment and biology emerges, you're going to see potential of more and more pandemic. And then as energy diversification worsens it, because today 60% of our energy basket is still fossil fuels, coal and petroleum. Unless that comes down to less than 40% of our basket and we go to renewables, the environment in which we live and the biological system will be under pressure because the global warming will continue to happen. And unless we sort of get it down to 5 degrees, in that 2 to 5 degrees as the Copenhagen Agreement was requiring, or Paris climate change, agreements required, we are going to be under pressure. So this 2021 to 30, we are in the midst of a new global shift. And in many ways, because of many reasons, India is actually in a very good position to actually be an important player in this global shift, especially in the global innovation economy. So what does that mean? We need to think in a systems logic. And what the system logic means, I will explain in a few minutes in the next slide. So these are the 4 domains in which the global innovation, whoever manages these 4 domains very well, they are going to be leaders. And that's why agriculture, where in India particularly, even though it contributes only 17 to 80% of our GDP, 50% of the population or around that depends on agriculture. So the value addition and sustainability of that agriculture will be very critical for the overall state of how India as well as the world advances, because world is dependent on India because we are 1.3 billion people, very young population with an average age of 27. And in many key areas, we are critically in the, whether in the West or here, we are critically in many critical domains of these innovation economies. And in particularly in agriculture, the diversity of Indian agriculture is phenomenal because of the small holding size and also the diversity of climatic conditions that India has from the Himalayas all the way south and east and west. So all this, if it can be managed sustainably with the systems logic, where the underlying logic not only addresses agriculture, but also food security, health, all the other underlying critical problems, then we can be in the forefront of the global innovation economy, where it's going to be more about systems integration and bringing together and understanding the underpinning connections from which hypothesis is built. What this means, I will tell you now. So today, we have a population about 7.4 billion people on the planet. By 2015, we'll be about 9 billion. And by the end of the century, I think we'll be about 10 to, it was projected to be about 11, but I think we'll be a little less. We'll saturate around 10.4 billion people. But still, it's a lot of people. And today, for a population that's 7.4 billion, we produce calories for 12 billion people. So we have extra calories for 5 billion people. So what does that mean? Since 2000, the whole face of global health has shifted away from infectious diseases. We still are susceptible, as we are seeing in the pandemic. But more importantly, since 2000, the globe is in a new burden. We still have undernourishment in 1 billion of our global population. But there are 1.5 billion to 2 billion of us who are getting these extra empty calories, meaning we need calories, but these are calories that push us towards diabetes and cardiovascular disease, these unhealthy domain, where we get these calories, but not the micronutrients and other supportive diversity of nutrients that makes us healthy. So we are in the midst of a global obesity crisis, and India is actually struggling a lot with this. Now, Indian population, diabetes itself is reaching about 8% of the population, but pre-diabetes is even higher. And therefore, the whole face of food, health, and wellness, they're connected. And so unless we see these connected roots and find the common causes and look at it from a systems logic, we will not be able to solve both the food problem and the health problem. The food problem is linked to the sustainability of the ecology, and the ecological problem is linked to the health issue. For example, I'll give you a very quick example. Legumes, for example, all the dals and chickpea that we eat is not only an important issue for ecological sustainability, but if you bring it back into the food domain, it's one of the best sources to give high levels of these nutrient factors that are missing in this high calorie diet, whether it's prebiotics for our gut health, or whether it's other micronutrients or better profile of proteins, or any number of it. So this legume itself, as an example, can solve ecological problems, food and health problems, and overall health wellness issues. So what it means is just addressing a critical control point around a legume, we can address 2-3 points. So that's how we think in systems logic. So in systems logic, you must see the connections of these different facets of human systems, the environmental issues, the energy decentralization, because the foundations of environmental breakdown is the carbon burden that we have, which is 60% of our global energy is coming from fossil fuels. So unless we decentralize away from fossil fuels, we're going to continually degrade the environment, not just warming, but various other facets of it, including dumping of extra nitrogen. Like from our agriculture, the amount of fossil fuel that's used for nitrogen fertilizers itself, in the last 100 years, we have sort of doubled or tripled the amount of nitrogen that goes into the environment, into our water systems. So that means this fossil fuel burden has a interconnected link across all different domains. And therefore, we need a much more systems approach where we take an integrated approach and see what are the control points that are connecting all these major issues: agriculture, ecology, food, health. So unless we see these connecting points and develop hypotheses based on those control points, then we will not be able to solve these problems, because these problems are connected. They're connected to the ecology of the system. And therefore, all your problem solving approach in a complex biological system, as it emerges into this complexity, you need to find the control points and not the components of the system, but the control points of the system. So when you build your hypothesis based on the control point, then you have a better approach to solving these problems, and you can then build teams that can then go and deal with individualized problem solving, whether it's food or whether it's health or better agriculture diversity or improving horticultural crops to balance out the nutritional need. How within the ecology we can have multi-cropping system, how it's tied to the economic system, how it can better manage the carbon burden that we have, including what is a balance of nitrogen fertilizer versus biological approaches, right? So all of these things will require a systems approach, and that's one key point to take. So this system approach, I will quickly run to this. Go ahead.
Sorry for interruption, Dr. Khalda Shetty. Could you please enable your video?
Oh, my video?
Yeah.
You can't, you mean what?
You're not visible. Your slides are visible, but yeah.
You want, when I'm sharing the slide, I don't think I'm visible.
You can enable, actually. You can enable.
Oh, where do we enable?
Down, start video.
That should be okay, Mohan. That should be okay. Thank you.
Oh, you want to see me too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
With you. Yes,
on the box side.
Okay, let me go to escape. You can still see my slide, right?
Yeah, we can see your slide.
Right. So what you really want me to do is go to the...
You can enable your video as well. On the right hand panel, on your name, you can the video is disabled, actually. Your
I
video
see.
is disabled. Your audio is.
Let me. Audio is okay. I have to go back to the.
On the right hand panel.
Start my video. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
now
you got it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Now your video is on.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so now, I'm sometimes clumsy going between between the site versus the slide. But you can see me now, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll go back to. Now you can still see me?
Yes.
Both we can see.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So as you think about systems rational, it didn't come out of out of nowhere. We really our Earth is, for example, 4.6 billion years of age at this moment. So our sun has a lifetime about 8 billion. So we are somewhere in the middle. But as you look at from all the evidence of how the Earth emerged and life emerged, there are some critical events. And this is very important because this shaped how the agriculture developed. So without going into too much details, I'm going to just give you some key events in Earth's history that finally came to the kind of agriculture that we have. Because if you understand these basic fundamentals, then your journey to understanding systems logic is much better. So if you look at Earth itself, without water, nothing can happen. So a lot of the water we see on Earth, or why Earth became such an abundance of water, is really we have to be thankful to the asteroid belt near Jupiter. So it is suggested the extraterrestrial bombardment from the asteroid belt is what brought the amazing water into Earth, and around 4.1 to 3.8 billion, early part of the Earth's history. So subsequently, around 2.4 billion to 2.1 billion years ago is where the early oxygenation by prokaryotic photosynthetic bacteria emerged. And this was very important because this oxygenation is actually started the engulfing towards the eukaryotic system from which plants and fungi and eventually humans all emerged. So we emerged from our prokaryotic anaerobic world, but then we had the early oxygenation of the prokaryotic photosynthetic bacteria from which we jumped into the subsequent eukaryotic system. So this engulfing and the dominance of photosynthetic solar-driven process is what is governing the plant systems and the agriculture that we see. So as this emerged, we had some important events on Earth, like the asteroid extinction at 1.4 billion years, around 65 million years ago. Why is this important? Because much later, these we humans that emerged came about because the mammals finally dominated after the dinosaurs went extinct. So as these mammals came out of the system, and ultimately the humans emerged from the mammals, human species are very young species. We are just 1 point, walking on our 2 feet. We are only about 1.1 to 4 million years old, depending on how and what these different Homo species that we are finding. But ultimately, it is the Homo sapiens sapiens that emerged out of Africa 60 to 250,000 years ago is what's dominating. And as they wandered around, it is really in the Neolithic communities that settled in organized civilization only happened 10,000 years ago into sort of early farming systems, but ultimately into the river valley civilization like Mesopotamia, Indus, Indo-Gangetic, also, Yellow River, Yangtze Kiang, Harango, Nile, the Amazon, and eventually including the Mesoamerican civilization. So the organized civilization and early agriculture, where wheat emerged, where rice emerged, where sheep emerged, where chicken was domesticated. So all of these facets of agriculture is very young. It's only 4,000 to 5,000 years ago when you compare it to the systems that emerged within the earth. Ultimately, what really happened to agriculture and domestication is really mercantile mass exchanges. So only 400, 500 years ago, as this European colonialism emerged, it is the Portuguese who identified Vavilov, the Russian botanists, geographic centers of origin. And from there, as these Portuguese traveled from Brazil to India to Goa to Macau and so different parts, it is they who, along with the other colonists, who sort of moved these crops around. Of course, they did it for their own colonial exploits, and it has its own burden globally. But yet, what happened is we had these exchanges, sugarcane plantations, and coffee was moved, and the opium trade from which tea trade moved around. So with all of these crops moved, and we sort of better understood this global exchange of crops. So this gave foundation to the early diversity of understanding of our agriculture that was shaped in the early river valley civilization. So this is very important as we look at ecology and diversity and sort of bring crop diversity into modern food systems. This diversity should be sustained. We can't go to these monocrop, few crop systems that we developed in this high calorie model. So we need to go back to these diversity of our crop origins and also to the early civilizations as humans settled into communities. So this origins and diversity actually shaped. So if you see the Earth's common metabolic control point, we had the ancestral prokaryote, ultimately the photosynthetic prokaryote. Ultimately, from there, we had the eukaryotic system emerged. And now you can see that we are still dependent on the ancient microbiome that is still part of us, right? That's why fermented foods are very important. But yet, it is the interplay of all these prokaryotic, eukaryotic systems that is still relevant. And if we don't understand that and couple that into our agriculture, our forestry, our animal fruit production, then we'll fail in meeting those functional balance that emerged with our ecology. So this ecological foundation based on that drives systems biology and systems logic is very important as we go forward and try to understand systems logic that shapes biology and ecology, and from there agriculture, and from their food systems, and from there our health. So we are product of our food system. Our health is a product of our food system. So this logic needs to be linked. So with that link, I sort of brought it down to a simple slide. So if you see today, we have global warming, we have ozone breaking. So all of these protective layers that sustain the prokaryotic, eukaryotic life is getting sort of not broken, but under threat. Global warming is a threat. Ozone is from a coal system, whether it's refrigeration or air conditioners, is a problem. And so that sort of reduces, it brings in a lot of radiation that can be detrimental to biological life. So this balance and the environmental consequences of it is very important. And so they sort of shape the carbon fixation and the macronutrient balance that's needed. So what is our food? Carbohydrate, protein, lipids, right? Those are macronutrients. And so that, along with micronutrients, and most importantly, water. Water is so fundamental because it is only when water is split is carbohydrate formed. So that's why the solar-driven process, the splitting of water, and that's what Dr. Krishna Shastri taught us. It's the splitting of water that really brings the carbon, gets hydrated. So that fundamental logic and how the microbial systems play. So all of this control points around this balance is very central, whether it's food safety or probiotics and microbial system for plant growth or human function, animal function. All of this interplay, whether it's for agriculture, food security, health, energy, this logic and systems interplay of our early evolutionary history must be brought in to shape the hypothesis for many of the problems we are solving or want to solve. And therefore, you can see many, for y'all in agriculture, this is not, this is very, it comes second nature to you, but it is the philosphere, rhizosphere that brought the equilibrium into the plant system, whether to shape the plant system and ultimately how we consume it, and then shape the gut microbiome. So today, one of the biggest failures of our modern food system, our high-calorie modern food system, is we do not feed the high fiber and protective elements that feed our gut bacteria, where there are more number of microbial systems in our body than our own cells that are needed for our metabolism. So this essentially comes from our ecology. So this broad ecology of microbial system and the metabolic biology that shapes it all the way from soil health to human health is very central. And so this is the kind of logic I'm trying to build. And so this systems logic of soil health, microbiome health, all the way to human health should be the central approach to the equilibrium we bring into our food system and ultimately to the health. And so that shapes the resilience. So when you talk about resilience, it's not only about surviving, but it's about thriving. So how under hardships can we thrive? And this can be only possible when we have a resilient system that's under very equilibrium. Only with the equilibrium and ecological biodiversity can we sustain our agriculture, our ecosystem, and the public health, nutritional challenges, and the community value addition, whether it's our health, our economic system. Okay, so this crop diversity and microbial diversity fed into ecological biodiversity is the central to both food and nutritional security. Just food security is not enough, because if we just go for food and macronutrient solution, we'll get diabetes and these other problems. So unless we have nutritional security based on the microbial balance and the cofactor of nutrition beyond macro and micronutrients, we will not have resilience in the ecology as well as in our food system. So this is an important take-home message. So this is like a systems logic thinking, where we are finding common control point that holds the resilience together, that makes us more resilient. where we see the interconnections, and through these interconnections we build a hypothesis towards solutions and our community needs and larger economic development needs. So with this in mind, if in my specific institute we are looking at there are many challenges, but we are looking at 4 major challenges. One, we still have 1 billion people who still need macronutrients, okay, carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, right? But yet we have 1.4 billion. While we still meet those food security needs of food, quantity, we also need to look at quality that is increasing the preventable non-communicable diseases like diabetes, starting with diabetes, which moves to cardiovascular disease, and from cardiovascular disease it goes to the other, cognitive breakdown, cancers. So they all oxidative breakdown diseases, all coming from a high calorie burden. And now we need to address both those challenges with climate change, where we are projecting about 5 degrees Fahrenheit, or 2 to 3 degrees centigrade, 5 degrees Fahrenheit change by the end of the century. That's a lot of, shifts in our climate, which is going to have consequences as to how we get these food diversity and system to be resilient to meet these challenges. And another important domain is horticulture, is the wastage we have in fresh fruits and vegetables, because they are important antidotes for many of the chronic disease that we face. For example, we need 7 to 10 servings of fruits and vegetable just to have the antidote for many of the preventable non-communicable chronic diseases, which I will explain in a few minutes. So these fruits and vegetables are high water systems, and the post-harvest challenges, cold storage needs, or value addition and management of them is required. So this food preservation and safety of our perishable horticulture is going to be a very important domain. And India is very fortunate because of our very diverse climate. We are able to grow very abundant amount of horticulture crops that can be well integrated into our grain and other crops as well. So this is very important as we look at not just climate change, but agriculture diversity, but more importantly, going beyond hunger to manage the non-communicable chronic disease like diabetes and its consequences. So with this in mind, if you now see the pandemic, this pandemic is really an eye-opener, because we are still mapping out what really has happened, because we are still in some countries in the 4th wave, some country in the 2nd wave. So, but if you look at broadly, if we see a lot of the susceptibility of COVID-19, where you had mortality of 2,000 deaths per million. So in a population per million, if you have 2,000 deaths or more, a lot of it had to link with the comorbidity. What do I mean by comorbidity? Those that are predisposed to diabetes, cardiovascular disease, where the inflammatory system is collapsed, where the innate immunity is much reduced. So they were more susceptible to this disease. Even in rich countries, they were not immune to this. If their food system was not good, whether it's Europe or Latin America. Haiti is a good example, as I was telling Seisha earlier. Haiti is a very poor country, and that island is divided half into Haiti with 11 million people, and the other half is Dominican Republic, which has 11 million people, same population approximately. But Haiti had 10 times lower COVID, because most of Haiti being poor because of colonial burden and many other reasons, they have deforested. So they depend on their own food system by growing their own food. So they were, in a way, they were fortunate not to get a lot of the high calorie foods that Dominican Republic got, which is more urbanized. They have more refined flour, refined sugar, refined everything, just like our urban environments in India or in many parts of the world. So we think good bread, good rice, and too much of rice or too much of bread is healthy food. And that's what happened in Dominican Republic. So, but if you see the COVID death of Dominican Republic versus Haiti, it's 10 times different, tenfold. So where it's about 30 to 40 per million in Haiti, where it's around close to more, it's not as bad as Latin America, but a little less than 1,000 per million in Dominican Republic. Okay. So even here, this health burden, even in this COVID, we can see this emerging non-communicable chronic disease linked by high calorie burden is also a problem for our comorbidity and failure of infectious disease, as we see in this. And so some of this data will come out soon. And therefore, here is sort of a slide that summarizes all that I've been telling. So our failure of our food system is at 3 levels. So we have enough calories. Our green revolution was great to meet those calorie needs because we were deficient in calories before 60s. So green revolution was fantastic. But we went into sort of a calorie burden system, not just us, but globally. And therefore, as we developed our food sufficiency based on macronutrients and micronutrients, we failed to see that when we have too much calories, it is the oxygen malfunction. That means we look at only carbon fixation, carbohydrate, proteins, lipids, and nitrogen that goes into the proteins or the amino acid and then protein. But we fail to see it's the breath, the oxygen that we breathe is the real control point of whether each cell is sustained. The mitochondrial function and how it partitions towards the pentose phosphate pathway is actually the balancer of how oxygen plays into managing the carbon that we consume or the proteins that we consume, right? So the whole food profile, when it's stripped into refined flour, then the oxygen function starts failing. So if you look at all our major chronic diseases, starting from diabetes, cardiovascular disease, autoimmune diseases, arthritis, cognitive failures, cancers, they are all oxygen malfunction failures. And another big failure of the whole food system is we strip away the fiber and therefore we don't feed the microbiome. So our body has about 1.5 to 2 kilograms of beneficial microbiota. So this microbiota has to be fed. And a lot of that comes from our fruits and vegetables and grains like legumes and whole grains, even rice. For example, in South Canada, for example, we eat boiled rice. So boiled rice has much higher fiber content. But overall, we need to bring the fiber across all grains and fruits and vegetables. Why? Because we feed the microbiome. So these 3 failures of the food system, the whole food failure that stripped away the oxygen protective function and the whole food profile that did not support the microbiome, is the fundamental failure of our food system. So this needs to be corrected all the way from seed health to human health. So that's why we need to look at this carbon function versus oxygen function as a control point. And from there, develop the systems logic to reinvent our agriculture. Some of this logic was already there in our indigenous knowledge. We just thought our ancestors were no good and we just build this modern system. But if we just go back to why my grandfather, after rice paddy, grew mung bean, that itself is a very interesting logic. Of course, the yields were different, but their multi-cropping system, intercropping system, all of this had logic. So if we can go back to that and link it back to the current challenges we face, and we develop a systems approach and bring back this ecological framework to our agriculture, food system, health, then our innovation platform can be much more rigorous and much more resilient. And therefore, unless we couple the ecological basis and the microbiome foundation all the way from soil health to the plant health to the ecosystem health to the human microbiome health, this critical point of the microbiome and the oxygen function, if we do not integrate, then we fail. Just the carbon framework that we have built is not good enough, because we can already see the failures of this across the globe. Our food system has failed and COVID has exposed it. There's many other failures which I have no time to go into, but the point here is the microbiome solution and the oxygen malfunction solution that we have stripped away from our food. And also we do not eat a diverse diet. About 10 major crops in the world make up most of our food. So we need to widen our food platform across multitude of crops. a whole range are traditional, indigenous, localized. Each ecology has their own. Lot more greens, so forest foods. So every ecology has, humans have intervened and brought this into their food system. So we should be respectful of that because they have ecological and health relevance. So as we go into this, we can see all the health breakdown that we are seeing, whether it's coming from the microbiome failure as well as the oxygen malfunction failure. So improvement of gut health, chronic disease management, immunity function, as we are seeing in the COVID crisis or in regular flu that we get every year. All of this requires a whole food approach that addresses the microbiome and how we couple our breathing, the breath, not just what we eat, but also how we breathe and how our breath couples. So carbon, nitrogen, water is excellent. They are the foundation of how the food is built, but it's how we breathe is what's coupled. So if you look at the 4 elements of the earth, carbon dioxide, water, nitrogen, and oxygen, the carbon fixation is important, and that's what we focused on, but it's actually the oxygen is the control point, and the microbiome, our early ancestors are important control point. So we need to bring this into our food system, and therefore this mitochondrial function and how we balance it is important, because all our current drug designs are breakdown in the structure function, whether it's cancer or inflammatory diseases. But in reality, we need to look at the whole redox protective function. So we should not allow the cells to break down towards disease where these structure function failures occur. Before these failures occur, whether from genetic to ultimately the protein level, we can bring better manage our apoptosis or cell death or or revitalization of our cells. So all of these functions can be better improved if we can have better redox regulation and better microbiome protection. So those are 2 important take-home messages of today. Our food system, all the way from soil health to human health, has to bring back the oxygen protective elements that are already built well into plant system. Plants are incredibly amazing eukaryotic system, where in their sessile nature, they have built these redox protective elements as they are autotrophic systems and have a very elegant protective mechanism. So that protection, we need to bring it through our diet, or whether we eat little, some meat, even in our meat production, we need to bring that in, along with the microbiome. So with that perspective, the take-home. Hello, yes. Yeah.
Nothing. Could you kindly mute your voices? It's a bit disturbing to the.
I thought somebody's asking a question. Sorry.
Nothing, sir. Nothing. The questions will come at the end, sir.
Okay. So the take-home message is the land plans that came on the planet, on which our ecological agriculture system has built, and I gave you sort of an Earth's history. And so it is really the 4,000 years ago when we domesticated and built a river valley civilization. And last 500 years, we took this plant life, plant-based food system around which we built our agriculture. But unfortunately, in our modern diet, we have built this high-calorie burden. And therefore, we need to go and fine-tune our oxygen protective function and widen the diversity of food we eat, and how much we eat whole grains, how much we eat fruits and vegetables, how much we support our microbiome. So with this in mind, if you see all the major disease we face today, we are in an oxygen paradox. While oxygen is important to get our energy, but the minute we have a high-calorie diet, as our mitochondrial function break down and we can't balance our cytosolic pentose phosphate pathway, they all go towards this major chronic diseases we face, starting with diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancers, autoimmune disease like arthritis, cognitive breakdown, or all facets of aging. They're all oxidation breakdown diseases. So therefore, we need to go to plants, and plants are elegant in every respect of ecological interactions, antioxidant response, signals for development, stress, seed vigor. In every facet, they have taken these protective Well, an example is phenolics, but there are many other compounds in plants, these secondary compounds we call them, which are important for redox balance, whether in a water environment or a water lipid interface or membrane water interface, or in a lipid environment itself. We have a whole series of secondary compounds which are not only responsible for some of the environmental adaptation, but very important. They're very important for the redox balance of the plant system. So as they take the photons from the sun and split, and the solar energy splits water and carbon gets fixed, it is the oxygen that balances that carbon function, as plant physiologists very well know. So this is well programmed into ecology and various facets of plant functions. So these functions, protective functions, has to be brought into our diet, whether from an oxygen protective function, but also from a microbiome function. And therefore, what we have done is, we don't want to reinvent the wheel, because our ancestors were already very smart. So every ecology, our ancestors already built many of these different species in their own indigenous local food system. So all we need to go back is to see, why did our ancestors in different ecologies build this? Because it was very adaptable to that local environment, right? So we need to go to that local environment and then put this logic into that traditional food. So we must go back to our traditional food, but we can add value with all this new thinking that we are having, but not losing sight of the ecological framework or the traditional food system. That's why going to ragi production or millets and whole range of grains is very important, because they had their own ecological value in survival. For example, when the Indus Valley civilization collapsed, a lot of it was due to drought. So as they moved out of the Indus Valley, they were sustained because they could grow these drought-tolerant millets. So they went into a much more diversified grain production system, away from water-loving plants, away from wheat and others, to more millet-based system. So new crops emerged. So all of these experiences in different ecologies are important. And if you can feed that back into the oxygen biology and the microbiome biology and bring a diversity of diet, so that can then shape the kind of structure function relations and compounds, because common in different ecology, different plants, for the same problem, they sort of fine-tune different phytochemicals or biological moieties to regulate the function. So if you can go back, like for example, in black soil, chickpea is very good. So we can look at chickpea, or in somewhere in South Canada, after rice crop, we grow certain kind of mung bean and others. So depending on which part, on which ecology, we can sort of take the same chemistry from different crop system and address this whole food requirement, where the oxygen function that breaks down towards disease as well as the microbiome function can be balanced. So to sum this up, this is sort of many years of work, many postdoc, many PhDs, many maths. So to sum this all up, plants are incredible, amazing species. So it is how they regulate their pentose phosphate pathway between a mitochondrial function and also run their anabolic protective function. And we think that this proline coupling is not only a metabolic response to an osmolyte, but really a proline coupled response can better drive the pentose phosphate pathway, where proline can replace NADH as a reductant. So this coupling can better harness the protective function of the secondary compounds. And here is an example of phenylpropanoid pathway controlling the anabolic response that's so critical for new synthesis in plants. So this anabolic response better runs the redox protection. And many of those compounds that are produced in plant species is how we try to explore that, whether in sprouts, whether it's in roots, in different species. So many of my students use this pathway and start to optimize the phenolic compounds in different food species to bring them into a whole food system. And so then we can then look at it into a disease platform. So in our specific case, we try to see how are these secondary compounds that are regulated through the pentose phosphate pathway enriched in different species of food plants in different ecologies. Like my students from Peru work on foods from Peru. If my students are from Chile, they work from Chile. They're from Thailand, they work from foods from Thailand. So if they're students from India, they work on some foods relevant to India. So we have now used this logic to specifically look at type 2 diabetes because it's the primary chronic disease that goes towards other disease. If we can manage diabetes, then we can manage the subsequent breakdown towards cardiovascular disease, autoimmune disease, cancers. The first breakdown is always diabetes. Why? Naturally, it's the carbon imbalance that accumulates. That's the oxygen malfunction that accumulates. And so the carbon function, carbohydrate management is central. So the good news is many of the drug antidotes that we take when we sort of reach midway through diabetes and we recognize the blood sugar is high, many of these antidotes are already there in many of our fruits, vegetables, and grains, alpha amylase inhibitors. So if we find this and we take this in a whole food profile, you don't even need to go to a stage where you need to get metformin or other glucose regulators. Many of these inhibitors are there across our food system, from cereals to legumes to fruits and vegetables. So many of, and within different indigenous crops. So we look for these, and particularly in, to summarize all this, we look for compounds that can regulate glucose naturally from our food system, beta cell function, where the glucose uptake into, regulating the insulin uptake function can be improved. Legumes are rich in some of these compounds. Oxidative breakdown, for example, late diabetes, we have eye problem or kidney problem or wound healing problem. These oxidative breakdowns can be better managed with a whole food profile. Blood pressure, which is the first sign that we are moving towards cardiovascular breakdown. High lipids is an important part of the whole glucose control breakdown. So this is also a problem for gestational diabetes because this is because once mother is sort of preset into diabetic, the child is predisposed not only in its early stages, but you set the child up for the lifetime to be predisposed to potentially being tuned towards diabetes. So taking care of gestational diabetes and child nutrition under this new platform is very important. And particularly in India, because we have such amazing diversity of our plant food that we need to get back and address this problem very early, right at the mothers, at expecting mothers. So this is here in the US is a big problem among our indigenous community because traditionally they had very rich, diverse food, but with colonial models and many other challenges, their food system sort of collapsed. And so they are 3 to 4 times higher predisposed to these problems. You can still hear me, right? Hello?
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Because last time when I gave a seminar, it was disconnected and I was just speaking to no audience.
No, please continue.
No, you are audible. You are audible.
Okay. So I'm a very much big promoter of indigenous food because it is where we can find diversity that support our microbiome and fight the bad effects of oxygen, high fiber grains, high fiber fruits and vegetables, good plant and animal protein balance, bring in more herbs and spice ingredients. All of this support the microbiome and the redox platform that I had told you about. And so to quickly go through here, for example, our indigenous people here in the Americas, whether it's North or South America, had a rich diversity of culturally driven concept. For example, here, Native Americans here have a 3 sisters concept: colored corn, colored bean, and squash and pumpkin. And if you start screening for the anti-diabetic and anti sort of blood pressure inhibiting compounds, these are 200 to 300 times more richer. But what happened to them as they were settled into, communities with tribal communities? They were given the refined food. They moved away from their own traditional food system. And so now we are trying to bring this back, because when we start looking at the health benefits, whether here they are rich in these anti-diabetic and many of the antidotes for hypertension, they're rich in them. And same thing, if you look at the Andean community, when they live in the high Andes. So this is one of my student who's now a professor there. What she has seen is when the high Andean communities go into Lima, Peru, their diabetes rates shoot up. So if they just go back to their traditional quinoa and their traditional food system, you can see that we can put these antidotes of these modern chronic disease into the food system. So here are some summary of these traditional crop food system that we want to bring back in the Andean region, especially in the indigenous communities. And particularly, we are trying to see how can we build these integrated, diverse gardens, which we have health targeted in its platform. And likewise, we are looking at these traditional crops, the maize selections, which we now don't use, but we need to bring this back because they're rich sources of the microbiome supporting foods, ingredients, as well as the redox protecting compounds. Likewise, here for the indigenous community, for maternal health and child health, we are trying to bring back the local food system and trying to redesign both for the maternal health and child health. And therefore, using this, we also trying to build a sort of an economic platform for sustainable production and community-based food enterprise around their traditional food systems and traditional food design. And therefore, as we look into the future, we need such sustainable production system where we can build a small cooperative models of the traditional food system, integrate into extension, and then we need to build such integrated agriculture value-added system all the way from soil health to human health, addressing not only ecological breakdown, but the agriculture sustainability, food security, as well as the major public health challenges that we face. They all, if you look at it from a systems logic, we can address that. And therefore, one of the important logic that I want to try to bring, many of the protective compounds that the plant needs to move away from its carbon flux towards protective against climate resilience, they are the same compounds that we need for health. So that nature is so amazing, because this dual function rationale of what plants need for their protection, where we can sacrifice some of the carbon flux towards their protective elements, we need not have so much yield. Some of that yield can go into the secondary compound that protects the plants, but also they happen to be the critical components for our own health protection. Okay, so this dual function rationale has interfaces both for climate resilient solution as well as human health, where some of the carbon flux can be moved towards the solution into a much more diversified food crop system. So this microbiome redox biology platform, coupled to traditional fermentation in the post-processing stage, we are trying to now take this to different ecologies around the world, especially in these indigenous communities that have suffered so much, and where we can build back their food system on this much more sustainable platform, all the way from soil health to human health. And now with geographical locational indicators, we can bring even economic platform into their system. So beyond that, I don't have time to talk about this. Another area that I'm very much interested in is our world we are more burdened with systems one, impulsive as well as a logical reasoning. But our real human function needs to move towards a calm observer, our mindfulness. So I'm interested in how different ecologies, our indigenous system approach this, and how food systems can be important, especially our serotonin system, because our gut-brain axis is a very critical component of this systems 1, system 3, this mind conscious platform. And it's actually the food that drives that. For example, if you see GABA, you can get a lot of that from legumes. So this GABA is a calming system, or DOPA, it's sort of, you need it for many of our dopaminic cognitive functioning system. Or if we have CBD systems, they also come from plants, but they also are equivalent to our serotonin system. So a lot of our serotonin precursors come from our diet. So this mind microbiome interaction is very central to how we function, and how a mindfulness state of our human beings actually is linked to our diet. But this logic was already there in many communities around the world, whether it's in the Andes or in India or in China or in any part of the world. They have come into different facets. So this is an area I'm interested in, and where I run some workshops on how to tap into this, and how then like intermittent fasting how is that important in understanding this gut-brain axis and integrating our food system on a wider level. How do you integrate intermittent fasting and mindfulness with diverse food systems that I talked about? So this is my last slide. So in a integrated system logic, we need to see control points. So as you see a system logic, this can show you so many exciting facets of how you can solve problems. And your problem solving is not just limited to agriculture and soil health, but also it comes into the value chain, into the food system, into nutritional security, and public health challenges that we face. And then you have a better problem solution approach with the system logic. And you can then look at it from a much more stronger ecological foundation, and look at the larger global challenges, which is not limited only to food security, but it's ecological security, energy diversification. So they're all interlinked. Water issue problems, nitrogen waste problems, they're all interlinked. And they're all interlinked to public health problems. So before even we go into medicine, we can solve all of these problems at the ecological level. And so that is the take-home message. And from the in the interest of excitement, so this is what keeps me excited, is looking at it from a systems logic, and also the knowledge that our ancestors were brilliant, and we need to give respect to every ecology of the planet, every ancestor of our human beings. As we migrated around the world, we built a lot of logic from nature. And as we have sort of dislocated our indigenous communities, we lost that knowledge. So we need to go back to that indigenous knowledge as we develop the science as well. So that is the take-home message. And I hope I was able to provide some insights to that. So this is my last slide, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your scintillating ideas. I'm sure the ideas that you put forth are very, very exciting to the upcoming scientists, student scientists. Well, you did make a mention about the idea of plants are incredible, and they carry lots of antidotes that are required for good health. Yeah. And you also made a mention about the failure of the food systems to be corrected, to bring back the oxygen or the redox balance. Yeah. And you also made a mention about the diet-linked improvement of the gut microbiome, which is very, very important for a healthy human being. And well, you also made a lot of points on how the non-communicable diseases can be prevented by indigenous foods with the system integration. Thank you very much, sir. There are a few questions.
Sure.
The first one is, what do you mean by ecological health, and does that include human health?
Yes. So what I mean by ecological health is sustainability of our ecology. Ecology is the foundation of a healthy food system. And so if our ecology is healthy, we can grow all these healthy food systems that can influence our gut health, that can influence our better redox protection, because many of the same antidotes that the ecology, the plants use and plant micro interactions use, many of those metabolic solutions or biochemical solutions the plant use, we can use. So what plants use for their own ecological sustainability and health and wellness, they also are the same metabolic logic that can flow into our functional benefits.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And the next question is, the oxygen we respire originates from microbes. You made a mention about it. How do you?
No, we have 19% oxygen on the planet. So oxygen that we get is actually, a lot of it's coming from plants. So what I was saying is, this oxygen that we breathe is really the critical control point of what we eat in our mouth. So what we eat in our mouth is the carbon, right? Carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, right? So as that is digested and broken down into simpler components for our energy, for our structure, for enzymes, for many things, it is the oxygen that goes with the glucose with the blood in the vascular system. The oxygen and nutrients go together, right? So as they go to every cell, it is the oxygen that enters every cell, and at the mitochondrial level, it is the oxygen that ultimately takes the carbohydrates to NADH and of course in the pentose phosphate NADPH, but also FADH and other reductants. So only when the reductants are coupled at the mitochondria do we get ATP. So it is the oxygen function that we breathe. If it's not coupled elegantly at the mitochondrial level and we sort of overburden it, and then the oxygen coupling, that is the last step where the water is formed, if that results in, as it's making its energy, it results in too many free radicals where the gap between the ATP gap, ATP generating gap between NADH and oxygen is not coupled elegantly, then you have a lot of redox breakdown. So cells are very good because we also have antioxidant enzymes to protect it. But these antioxidant enzymes can work only well when we also have diets that can couple them well to make the antioxidant work well at that gap with NADH oxygen gap in the mitochondria. So that is what I was saying. So as the oxygen goes, as the glucose goes and goes down into our basic reductants, and that's coupling, if it's inefficient and if it's not coupled elegantly with the pentose phosphate pathway, where the balance between oxygen generating and ATP that's generating from the oxygen coupling, but also some of it is coupled towards making new synthesis, right? What does the pentose phosphate pathway do? You get ribose 5-phosphate, all these phosphorylated compounds. We get purines and pyrimidines, and in plants, phenolics are made from this point. Growth rate, IAA, is made from this point. Cytokinins are made from this point. Carbon fixation in plant, the ribulose 5-phosphate, comes from the pentose phosphate pathway. So this energy coupling versus reductant has to be coupled. But we are not autotrophic, so we eat all of them. So we breathe the oxygen, right? So we need to get those solutions from plants. Plants are able, because they're autotrophic, they have dark and light cycles, so they can elegantly manage it. So, but we need to manage by what we eat. But if we eat only carbohydrates and piles of rice and refined chapatis and with the high calorie, the burden that we have now, then that oxygen burden worsens, where the energy generation coupling as the high sugar. First of all, high sugar is burdened with diabetes, insulin system trying to keep up with it, right? Because as you throw in more glucose or more sugar, your pancreas has to kick out this insulin to sort of try and move it to different cells. Very soon it gets worn out, and then you have slow crippling of the insulin system. At some point, you'll have to start taking insulin injections. But at the early stage, if you can reduce this burden and have plant compounds streamline that how much of glucose your pancreas, is released, and your pancreas is accordingly sort of metered to get its insulin to work for you. So in that sense, if you eat a more whole food system and make microbiome to support you to manage this more elegantly, then you don't have to go to metformin or drugs that ultimately are given to you to sort of manage this. And so what does our body do? Yeah, we sort of throw it into the liver.
Yes, sir. Sir,
Go
thanks
ahead,
for the
please.
elaborate explanation and substantiating your statements. There's another question. We have ancient microbiomes in our body. Can plant pathogens behave like human pathogens? If yes, do you have any specific examples?
Yeah, they may, not in all cases, but they could be some areas like in certain pseudomonads, certain bacillus. But in many cases, plants, because they're autotrophic and their rhizosphere system, they have their own genesis. But there are not many examples of where plant pathogens have crossed over. In many cases, in our modern food system, enteric bacteria have gone into plants. For example, E. coli 0157. It actually came from bad feeding practices to cows. So when the cow dung goes into the waste stream, if we use that waste stream and for growing cabbage or anything else, it can come into our food system. But many times plants have rarely sort of crossed over into human pathogenicity. You could have some like pseudomonads and some bacillus. There are species on both sides, but there hasn't been as bad a situation as this way. Going from bad practices in the animal food system into coming through plants into food. Like they could come from apple juice because apple has fallen into a cow dung where the E. coli was seen, right? So that way we are seeing more of those problems.
Thank you, sir. Another question is, promotions of global trade in agriculture products and importance of indigenous food systems in resilience, are they not contradictory? How relevant is Eat Local movement?
Oh, very good. Yeah, that's a very good question. I strongly feel building the indigenous and geographic indicators, it's already there. Europe is pushing that for wine and different areas. So India has a lot of opportunity here. This is one of the best sort of paradigm for local, sort of maintaining local historical value foods. So I think it can be a very strong platform, not under value-added health platform. It can be one of the excellent value-added economic development platforms. So it need not be only an export platform. Why should it only be an export? And if there are some surplus, of course, we can export. But it can be within the country, within the state, within the region, right? If diversity can give us a lot of the ecological balance and health balance and food security resilience, and if they can give you a higher value for health perspective, right? Then growing specialty corn, that has, I'll give a good example, a real example. So we work with sort of an indigenous community in the high Andes. So these were very poor people who had only some sugarcane. So initially they were disorganized and they were depending on the drug trade. But then UNDP gave some money and they started a cooperative of 50 farmers, each with 1 acre. So these 50 acres, they grew sugarcane, some orange, some few things. And then they grow over time, over 10 years, that cooperative grew to 3,000 farmers with 5,000 acres. Yeah. And so now they were more organized. And so they could grow through the cooperative. So this cooperative grows a specialty sugar cane, which is partially pan refined, not fully refined to white sugar, and they sell that sugar for 3 times higher price because It's that brown sugar with lower glycemic index load, right? So we have even measured that. And so that sells in the US market and even Peruvian market at 3 times higher price. But the value added technology needed is just a pan refining, not even the high sugar refining that is there in the factories. And so that kind of appropriate technology and value addition that is targeted towards health can be a very niche, localized value addition, in many communities, I think.
Thank you,
The
sir.
more diversity, the better.
Yeah, we'll take such issues, probably put it across to the policymakers. Maybe such refining systems may have to be modified in India as well. Due to shortage of time, we will not be able to take all the questions that were put forth. The one last question, sir. Life expectancy has increased in the Indian context. Do you think our diverse food systems are responsible? Is it
partially? I'll give.
Yes, sir.
Oh, very good question. So I'm now, we are working with few collaborators in the world, and I'll give you a good, actually we just got the book project approval. This is about Korea. See, so far in the world, Japanese live the longest. But by 2030, Koreans are going to live the longest. And we now are putting together a book why that is the case. And the biggest lesson we are seeing now from that book is food diversity. So the Korean food diversity, like Japan, Korea can only use 30% of their land. And so they've used every mountain corner, river corner, whatever corner they have to grow diverse grains, food system and maintain that culturally relevant food system and still use it today. So as they became modern and one of the most technologically advanced societies on the planet, they are living longer because they held on to their traditional food system. So if you go and eat, even in Seoul, in a modern Korean, restaurant, it is amazing how much of their traditional food, not just kimchi, but everything else, they're maintained. Even their chicken is still, has ginseng and many other local ingredients. And so they're a good example, and it is already translated as we conquer public health challenges and you have a good diverse diet and healthy diet, the population can live longer. And if you take the same, we are doing other studies at a similar level, and we are seeing the same, like for example, Crete in Greece. It's economically moderate, but yet they live long, right? And so there are many other, Okinawa in Japan, it is economically not so rich as the rest of Japan, but yet their diverse food habits gives them the most healthy longevity. Of course, the Koreans have now taken over; they live longer, but they live same as the Okinawans. But but within the Japanese society, Okinawans live the longest.
So I'm sure all our young students are taking note of this. They have a big burden of shouldering this responsibility of promoting indigenous foods, and so that we can stay longer and live longer. Thank you very much, sir, for your exciting talk and also answering all the queries that were put forth. Thank you very much, sir, again.
Sir.